listening to the Straight to Video podcast with Rob Lane.
Hello, and thanks for tuning in to the Straight to Video podcast. If you're new to this, thanks so much for checking it out, and for those already on board, then also thank you with all my heart for coming back for more. The kind words from everyone really motivates me to keep chipping away and having these conversations with all these cool people, and it's been a lot of fun. For those that may be listening for the first time, I'm your host, Rob Lane, and over the past few weeks I've been speaking to fellow musicians and getting them to tell stories of growing up and what influenced them to take the path they're currently on. I'm a big 1980s geek and love anything related to pop culture of that time, and a lot of these people are sharing stuff that brings back a lot of fond memories, and I hope it's cool for you lot listening too. I've got some really fun chats already in the can for coming episodes, and I'm also talking to people outside of the music industry, from TV and film, which will also bring some great chat and stories along with it. Today though, I'm talking to the wonderful Carol Hodge. Carol is a UK-based singer-songwriter and pianist. She's perhaps more importantly though, top draw when it comes to being a touring musician. She just understands what's needed. She's professional, level-headed, and when on the road she has this just great chilled vibe about her, and that's what being a touring musician is all about. You can be the most talented person in whatever instrument you play, but if you don't have that right headspace to be around new people, particularly first thing in the morning or last thing at night, maybe 2 weeks into a tour that perhaps involves a lot of travelling, or perhaps them shows aren't going great, then things can turn rocky really fast. I've been lucky enough to tour with Carol a bunch of times now with our band Ryan Hamilton and the Harlequin Ghosts, and it's nothing but a joy. Carol came to my attention many moons ago though, when she guested on the JD in the FDC's album Recognise. We also discovered we had another mutual connection, as she used to drive for my old touring buddies, Irish punk rock legends the Dangerfields. Again, this just it cements how interconnected this whole underground music scene is. If you stay out there long enough, you'll eventually meet up with all these cool folk. Carol is also the go-to pianist for Steve Ignorant of Crass and his acoustic project Slice of Life, and she's also guested in the past with the Membranes and the mighty Ginger Wildheart too, so you might have seen her playing with those guys. Like I said, when you have someone as talented and reliable as Carol, then you land the good gigs. Be sure to check out Carol's brand new album Savage Purge, which was released this year. It really showcases her songwriting talents alongside her playing and singing with some amazing tracks, including the album's lead single, Stop Worrying Baby, and its video featuring acclaimed actor Dominic Brunt. Carol describes the album as full of hope, energy, self-discovery and positivity. You can pick it up direct from her website at carolhodge.co.uk. Thanks again for checking out the Straight to Video podcast. Please continue to follow, like and share wherever you listen. And for now, let's dive into my chat with the brilliant Carol Hodge.
Get into the car like clockwork. Try not to overthink each turn. And there can only be one destination, but so many routes, so many things to learn. And the last time I got so burned, I still feel the heat around me like a fire. If I've just one life to live, if I know I'll die alone, then just stop worrying, baby, and go and do it all on your own.
I don't really remember this, but it's one of those memories that I think I've built based on what my parents have told me. You know, that thing of, you imagine you've seen a photo of something and that sort of actually impregnates a memory in your head.
Right, yeah.
But apparently I was obsessed with the song Don't Mess With My Toot Toot, which I think is it's either Little Richard or Jackie Wilson. And whenever my parents played that, I had this dance that I did. So I think I was probably about 3 at the time, and I would sing along to it. So that was probably my first. The first song that really stuck with me. But in terms of musical awakening, I always kind of default to a couple of stories, and this is one of them. When I was about 8 or 9, my dad had it was at this point when I started pilfering his tape collection and his record collection, and he had a tape that was Queen, A Night at the Opera on one side, and Sheer Heart Attack on the other. And I remember having that tape and just kind of playing it to death. This specific song was maybe actually Love of My Life by Queen, which is on the end of A Night at the Opera. I don't know what it was. It was just something about that song and just something about both of those albums, to be honest, that just really pulled me away from what I was listening to previously, because it was just what was on the radio. And all my mates were in to Take That, and I just sort of chose one of them. I chose Mark Owen because everyone had to choose a Take That-er that you liked more than the others. So I was like, oh, that one I like his hair. So, but I wasn't really invested in it. And then when I heard that tape, I was like, oh, this is brilliant.
You kind of got lucky then, really, if that was the last song on the album and your dad had put it onto, had he taped it off a vinyl?
He had.
Yeah, you kind of got lucky, really, because if he'd have got the wrong too short a tape, it might have missed that song totally.
And wasn't that always the fear? Because I remember doing it as a teenager, having those C90 tapes, which is 45 minutes a side, isn't it? And there were some albums that were just too long. And then you always had the quandary of like, well, do I just miss off the last couple of songs? Or do I put them on the next side? And then what do I do with the rest of that side? So it was quite fortuitous that both albums fit on a 45 minutes a side tape.
Very lucky indeed. You could have gone down a totally different path if it missed off Love of My Life on the end of that.
Yeah.
Queen of rubbish. They don't end albums right. So what was you into before then?
Whatever my friends were listening to. You know, my parents sometimes played tapes and records in the house, but it was generally the radio. I had a radio in my room from a very early age, so I used to listen to long wave radio, Atlantic 252. I don't know if you remember that.
Mm-hmm.
I used to listen to Radio 1. And because I was a rebellious child, obviously, I would try and tape the songs off the radio and create my own mixtapes. You know, you do that thing where you're waiting for the presenter to shut up so you can let go of pause and it'll start recording the actual song. So, yeah, that and before that, I also, I started keyboard lessons when I was about 8 years old. And I had a book of like learning to play keyboards, and it had loads of songs in it. So it had things like Scarborough Fair, the Simon and Garfunkel version. It had Sloop John B, Stevie Wonder song. What was it? Oh, I can't remember. Isn't She Lovely? That was it. So my dad made me a mixtape of all the songs that were in my book so I could hear how they went. And then he stuck the rest of Pet Sounds on the space on the back of like the second half of the tape. So that was another tape actually that was quite important to me, forming relatively informed musical taste for an 8 or 9 year old. Definitely.
So you mentioned Take That earlier, so I'm presuming that was kind of around the time of Oasis and Blair and all that kind of stuff as well?
A little bit earlier. I
Right.
mean, we're talking sort of maybe sort of between 90 and 93, 94, because I was born in 82, so it was kind of like, when I was like 8 to 10, I would always buy Smash Hits. Was it Smash Hits had the words? They had the lyrics to certain songs in them. And that was enough. So I would just like any sort of chart songs. I remember things like, who was it? Shanice, I Love Your Smile. I remember Right Said Fred. All the sort of pop stuff that was out at the time. A couple of times there were Nirvana lyrics in there, and there was like Pearl Jam lyrics. And my brother's a bit older, and he was into that sort of thing. So I was kind of like, had those things on my radar, probably from about, 1992, 93.
I think that's kind of cool, actually. I spoke to a few people, and when they've got the older siblings, older brothers and sisters, it almost gets you into music earlier. Most people kind of really get the music bug around 15, 16 and stuff, where they're finding their own identity. But if you've got like an older sibling who are playing the music when they're 15 and 16 and you're perhaps 11, 12 and stuff like that, it kind of gets you into it a little bit of a earlier education rather than just the current pop stuff. So you're hearing all this cooler stuff before you perhaps would.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was definitely the case with my brother. I mean, he was 3.5 years older than me, which is just enough of a gap for me to be his annoying younger sister. So he would have been about, probably from the age of about 14, he was getting into grunge. So I was like 10, 11 and sort of just becoming aware of it. And then by the time, 1994 hit, I would have been 12. And that was when all the big albums came out, Dookie by Green Day, Smash by Offspring, Trouble Gun by Therapy. So he had all these tapes that I would go in and tape his tapes of tapes, if that makes sense. So, like one of your mates would buy a CD, one of his mates would buy a CD and then they'd all pass it around and copy it onto tape. So he had this one tape that was Smash by The Offspring on one side and Trouble Gun by Therapy on the other. And I copied that tape, and that was another big moment of awakening for me. I was just like, "What is this music? It's awesome!" And we got MTV, we got Sky TV around the same time, so MTV was always on, and it was like early Dookie era, Green Day, Offspring. It was around the time that Black Hole Sun was constantly on Soundgarden, and Sabotage by the Beastie Boys. So yeah, that was quite an important turning point as well.
Was that kind of the first time I thought, this is music which is going to give me an identity?
Yeah, I don't know what it was. There was just there was like a rebelliousness to it, absolutely. So obviously, I looked up to my older brother and he was a little bit rebellious and, he was into all these really cool bands. And, I'll just hear them across the hall and think, oh, that sounds cool. I like that. I'll have to sneak in and get a copy of that later when he's gone out. And like I say, having them on MTV and actually being able to see them. I'm reading a book at the moment by Ian Winwood, and it's called Smash, and it's all about basically 94 and when sort of punk rebroke again in America. And he was drawing the comparison of The Offspring versus Green Day. Like Green Day were quite sort of poppy, and they were quite sort of cute teenage-looking boys almost. They were like a sort of boy band in a way because of the aesthetic. Whereas The Offspring, like all their videos were quite dark and you couldn't really see them. The ones off the third album, actually, Smash, but the first breakthrough album. And so I was kind of like equally intrigued by these two things of like, oh my gosh, I'm in love with Billie Joe Armstrong. Look how cute he is and how amazing is this band. And then also the flip side of like, Therapy were a bit dark and edgy, Offspring, there's this really quite sort of hard sounding music, quite like dangerous lyrics as well. Can't really tell what they look like that as well. So it's kind of drawn to the whole package really. Anything that just sounded a little bit different, a bit edgy.
Where was the area you grew up? So was all your friends into that kind of music as well?
I grew up in Barrow-in-Furness in Cumbria, which is basically a shipbuilding town. Shipbuilding. I think I was a bit of a pioneer among my friendship group. Certainly among the girls, I was the one who introduced them to the likes of, Radiohead and Green Day and Offspring and Soundgarden and Hole. They were another big one. And I remember sort of going out with these boys. You know how it's like when you're younger, you and your mates go out with a group of boys and everybody sort of matches up with somebody. So we were going out with these boys and they were really into like the same bands that I was, and I was just like really excited. So I'd just be like saying stuff about an album or whatever, and they say to my girl mates like, "Oh, what do you think?" And they're like, "Yeah, we like that song too." So I was the one who sort of knew a little bit about it and was really excited to find other people, not from my group, who knew about it.
So at what point did you think, right, I want to have a shot at this? Where did the whole band thing come into the story?
As long as I can remember, I've always sung. So I remember being at primary school and, kind of getting picked to do a solo in a play or whatever, because I had quite a good voice and I could sing in tune. And then at church, I always sang as well. I went to church until I was 11. So every Sunday, that was the best bit when you got to sing the hymns. And that's quite weird as well, because I always remember there was an old lady who used to stand behind us in church, and she always used to sing harmonies over the top of the melodies. And she had this really warbly voice, like really sort of loads of vibrato on every single, like singing like that. But that was, I think I kind of picked up how to sing in harmony from her in a really sort of a subconscious way. But yeah, so always been singing. And then from about the age of 8, I really wanted to play keyboards. And my brother picked up this tiny little Casio keyboard at a car boot sale. I don't know if you remember the ones where you put a cartridge in.
Yeah.
There's little lights above the keys and you sort of helped you to sort of play along. So he got bored with it in about a week and I sort of picked it up and stuck with it and loved it. Yeah, saved up my pocket money, managed to get a keyboard and then begged my parents for keyboard lessons, which they finally relented to. Yeah, that was it. So from about the age of 8, I was playing keyboards and loving it, yeah.
Any particular songs which you took to the teacher and said, I want to learn this one? Or did you have to go through the usual songbook songs? Or did you try and, can you teach me, I don't know, was it like Tori Amos kind of stuff?
Oh, I think that was much before I'd ever heard of Tori Amos, I think that was. I do remember really liking, and I taught myself to play it. I must have just heard it somewhere by ear. Because this is another thing I always forget about. We didn't have the internet then, and I didn't have a recording of this song, so I must have just heard it on something on TV or whatever, and just figured out how to play it. And it was The Entertainer by Scott Joplin. And so I just figured out how to play it. And I remember I went to my piano teacher's house, who used to do the lessons in her living room. And up until that point, I was playing keyboard because of my hand. I've got 2 fingers on my left hand. So she thought I wouldn't be able to play piano. So she just thought, you can use 1 finger or 2 fingers to hold down a chord, like on the sort of Bon Tempi keyboards where it plays like a sort of backing track and you can just change the chord sound. So that was what I've been doing for like a couple of years. I remember I got there early once and she was like, I'm just going to go to the loo. And I actually jumped onto the actual piano that she had. And I played The Entertainer, which I'd taught myself. And she came running down the stairs and she's like, what are you doing? I was like, I'm really sorry, because I played the piano. I thought I was in trouble instead of, just waiting by the keyboard. And she was like, no, show me what you did. So I showed her and I was doing all this stuff with my left hand that I'd just made up. And she was like, right, that's it. So from today, we're going to learn piano. We're stopping keyboard. We're doing piano. You can do it. I was like, all right, cool. So that was quite a fortuitous moment, really.
You've had these 2 life-changing moments by accident. Your dad managed to get a Queen album all on one side, and then your piano teacher went to the toilet and sent you on these totally different paths.
Yeah. Isn't it funny when you look back and you just think, because you kind of think of your life as being, I don't know about you, but I think of my life as being quite chaotic and just sort of following wherever the wind blows me a lot of the time. And then when you have enough time, enough distance to look back, you do realise there are key moments and there's key people and there's key incidents that if that had been on a different day or if it had not quite happened that way, who knows what would have happened. Sliding doors moments, isn't it?
Definitely, yeah, it's a really good comparison. Yeah, who knows, just you could have been in a different mood, or I say someone played you a different song, or they brought a different tape to school or something like that, and it just totally changes everything.
I might have been a saxophone playing Take That fan.
Amazing. Any kind of role models you gravitated to when you started taking music seriously?
I remember, I was, absolutely adored Queen. So, Freddie Mercury. Wasn't massively aware of what he even looked like, but just hearing his voice, just meant so much to me. And that was kind of what I wanted to sound like. I wanted this big, sort of emotive rock voice. I also remember really liking 4 Non-Blondes. So I can't even remember what year it was, but when What's Up came out, because that was kind of like their big hit, wasn't it? And then they sort of dropped off the radar in the UK. And just seeing Linda Perry, and I was like, oh my gosh, I so want to be like her. And the other person was Siobhan Fay in Shakespeare's Sister. I just thought she was the coolest person ever. She's wearing that whole gothic, sparkly black catsuit with the proper goth makeup and the black crown of thorns. And I was just like, oh, wow, who is this person? I just, every time that video came on, I was just transfixed by it. Yeah, so those 2 stick out for me as, I guess, kind of quite alternative women in music that I kind of wanted to be like.
Very strong and I'm going to use the word credible, right? You pick one of the greatest frontmen of all time with Freddie Mercury. You pick Linda Perry, who went on to be one of the biggest songwriters of her generation. And then you had this really striking image from Shakespeare's Sister as well. So you kind of ticking all the boxes, really. You got the image, you got the songwriting, you got the performance all in one. So that was a good selection. So that's pretty good going.
I think I was a goth when I was about 9 years old. I was definitely a goth because I think that was about the time that Shakespeare's Sister song came out. And it was around the time I first saw Beetlejuice, and I was just like wanted to be Winona Ryder so badly. So yeah, I think there was definitely a goth theme going on there.
Was it easy to get a foothold in like the local music scene when you did decide to dive in there, or how did you even go about that?
Again, looking back, I didn't really have much ambition to sort of be in a band. Me and my mate Gemma, we would do covers of songs, and we'd sometimes sing them at concerts at school, or sometimes I think we did it a couple of times in assembly. We'd like learn a song, and because I could sing harmony, she'd do the lead and I'd sing the harmony, and we'd sound pretty good. So it's kind of doing that from about the age of sort of like 13, 14. And then I got to be mates with John Kay, who I'm still really good friends with to this day. Him and a couple of other lads had sort of started a band, and this is when we were like just turned 15. We were in I think it was when we were in year 10 at school. Yeah, year 10, 1997. And so that was like, oh my gosh, I've got to try and get in on this, because like, if I get to hang out with John, that'd be awesome, because he's like one of the best people I know. And they're doing music. Maybe I can be like a backing singer or something. So I remember going along to this rehearsal in the bass player's garage. The singer at the time didn't really like me. We went to primary school together and stuff, and we just never really saw eye to eye. And then, so he wasn't happy with me and Gemma being there, because we were like, oh, we can do some backing singing. We just elbowed our way in. And then a few days later, it was like, oh, he doesn't want to be the singer anymore. And I didn't know this, but they really wanted me to be the singer, but they thought me and Gemma came as a package. So they were like, they didn't know how to approach it. And then they were like, oh, well, we really want you to be our singer, but we're not sure about Gemma. And I was like, oh, well, she can be a backing singer then. I was like, we come together. So anyway, I can't remember how it all sort of panned out. But yeah, eventually I was a singer. We got a drummer from another school. And then we just started off doing covers. And where I grew up, Barrow, there was actually a massive music scene there. Every Thursday, Friday, Saturday, there were easily sort of 10 pubs that always had live music on, and were always, busy. And then there was like the sort of satellite towns as well, sort of going out. There was Dalton, Askham. This makes no sense to anyone who's not actually from Cumbria. Dalton, Askham, Ulverston, and then a bit further afield there was Millham, there was Kendal. So there's all these opportunities of places to play. And because we were a really young band, people thought we were a bit of a novelty. And because we were actually quite good, we managed to pick up, through John's dad, who became our manager, just so everything was proper. We had a manager. Yeah, he got us loads of gigs, and we saved up and we bought our own PA, because that was a thing back then. It was like you would just turn up at a pub and you would need to have everything, the PA and all your gear. And they'd pay you quite handsomely at the time, to sort of play 2 or 3 sets. So yeah, that's how I started, it was the whole, either 3 sets of half an hour or 2 sets of 45 minutes. So we learned a ton of covers, and then we sort of started bringing our own songs into it. So within a couple of years, we were pretty much, sort of 75% our own songs, 25% covers. And we just grafted, we played like twice a week for a long time, a good sort of like, 2 or 3 years, and just, got better at what we did.
What was the name of the band, and was it a particular style of music?
We were called Synco, Synko, and that was because there was 5 of us, because it's like Spanish for 5, but spelt in a different way, because we were really edgy. And we started out just doing the songs that we liked. So I think that first, the first sort of big brace of covers we did, there was some Oasis in there. I remember we did a Cooler Shaker song. We did No Doubt and Green Day, obviously. Nirvana. We did some Radiohead. It was one of those, like Mike Street Preachers, pretty much whatever was it just come out in the charts, sort of indie or alternative wise. We were pretty hot on it. We'd sort of learn things that had just come out a couple of weeks before and like sort of incorporate them into our set. So it's great fun, it's like, there's a new No Doubt song, let's learn it and then we can play it next week. It was, awesome.
So what happened to that band? Did it just kind of use your thing? People left? Did you get any opportunity to go elsewhere and take things to the next level?
Well, do you know, it's so weird to think back on it, but we actually had A&R people come in to see us in Barrow. Again, I think we had like about a year window when we were like sort of 15, 16. I mean, we played quite a few industry showcase gigs. I remember we had somebody from Creation in particular was quite keen on us. So he came to see us a couple of times in Barrow. So at the time, it was like, great, this is it. We're going to get a deal. We're going to get signed. And this was about 97, 98. So it's just at the sort of the end of that massive, music industry heyday where they were just throwing money. Any band that was a bit alternative you could vaguely play, they were just like, throwing them $100,000 to record an album. So I think we just sort of were at the tail end of that, and nothing ever happened. Nothing ever, bit properly. And it just kind of fizzled out. I joined another band, Sadie Hawkins Dance, when I was 21, and then I think Cinco kept going for another couple of years after that, and then I think we were together for about 10 years. Obviously things sort of fizzled out and people moved on, and I'd moved away to Manchester when I was 18, so it was kind of a long distance affair. But yeah, it was a great first band to be in, a absolutely brilliant music scene in Barrow as well. Like, really grateful to have had that opportunity.
Was it like a punk rock music scene, or just was it a free-for-all of all different kinds of music? So that's the thing with the 90s. It was very indie alternative, but there's no real rules or boundaries in a way, so pretty much anything goes.
Do you know, that's absolutely what it was like. It was, there was a lot of indie bands, and there was some that were strictly indie. But there's quite a few bands like us, just sort of teenagers who were just playing a bit of everything, like everything that they fancied, and writing their own songs that were kind of a weird mixture of all those genres sort of pulled in together. So it's really exciting looking back on it. I'm so glad I did that with my teenage years. It could have been a lot more destructive activities I could have engaged in, but I was down the pub every weekend, but I was playing. So it's quite good, really.
Was you the main songwriter in the band, or was it a collective?
It was kind of mainly me, and then John, the keyboard player, he wrote some, and the bassist wrote a couple. I think the guitarist maybe wrote one or two. We had a few different sort of lineups over the years as well. I was certainly probably the main songwriter, and I tended to write most of the lyrics. Even if someone had come up with the music, I'd sort of put the vocal line on it. But yeah, again, it was quite fertile ground for learning my craft as a songwriter as well, especially when you got a band to think of. And it was one of those, I had a piano at home, so I'd write the songs, but there'd be vocals and piano chords. And then obviously, the guitarist had add his bit to it, the bassist had add theirs, the drummer would come up with something. So it was very much fleshed out as a group.
You've always seemed incredibly DIY. Do you think that's a punk rock thing, or you just realised early on that you can, if you work hard, you can always find ways of doing things yourself?
I think it was just literally just because I happened to grow up in Barrow and it happened to have that music scene, and that was just what you did. It wasn't like we're thinking, we're punk rock, we're DIY. It was just like, well, you just go and watch other people's bands and see what they do, and then you speak to the pub and they book you, and that's just what you do. And you earn your own money and you save up and you put that money towards your instruments and your gear, or if you have to hire a van to go somewhere a bit further outfield. So it was always been of that ethos of everything goes back in the pot. Like I think I learned very early on that it's highly unlikely music is going to be lucrative in a financial sense, because it was just like, I'd slog away, every weekend playing these gigs, and it wasn't hard work. It was a lot of fun, but you never saw a penny. It just all went in the kitty, and there was always something to pay for that, didn't come back to us as musicians. So
how did you network in those early days, pre-internet? Was you a big fanzine person, mailing lists and all that kind of stuff, or was there other things around that area?
That's a good question. I think until about 2001, I didn't really play outside of the sort of local area. The furthest was maybe about 45 minutes drive away from Barrow. And that was more, I think that was a lot of getting those gigs was to do with John's dad, because he was a little bit of a wheeler and dealer. Like, he knew a lot of people, and he'd always be asking, be pushing us and ringing venues up and saying, I've got this great young band, get them to come and play and all this sort of thing. So yeah, we had him to thank for a lot of the gigs that we got. And then the local paper, I think, was a big, they had a music column, and every Thursday it came out. We'd always go to John's house and be like really excited when the paper came through the door. I mean, scroll through the entertainment section. Are we in it? Are we in it? They're talking about Cinco. And that would be all the listings, and, they do the usual reviews of gigs and interviews with bands and everything like that. And then beyond that, it actually was the internet. It was forums. I don't know if you remember forums. students, and we had a website, a very sort of early-ish website. And yeah, a mailing list that came from that website. Never really been that aware or that into fanzines at that time, to be honest.
It is weird now when you think back, like, how did we do stuff back then?
Yeah.
How did we get to this gig, and how did we find out about that place? It's baffling now. We take so much for granted these days, and it's so much easier to do stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really hard to explain to younger people that we actually did all this stuff without the internet. And like, yeah, literally, I can't remember. Like, you know, I can't really remember how we did it. It's quite amazing, especially when it got to a bit later on and we were driving to gigs and we had no sat nav. That's the thing that people forget and take for granted. I think I remember about maybe 2 or 3 times getting really lost in a town and not being able to find the venue. But most of the time, there was either someone in the band who had been there before. You would just get to a town and pull up and ask someone and just ask, you know, you might have to do that a couple of times if it was quite far away. You'd sort of like relay down the street or whatever to finding people who could give you directions. And then occasionally, sort of later on, I remember having printouts of AA Route Master. You know, if you're going somewhere really far, if you're London or something, you'd be like, okay, well, let's get a proper printout of where we're going.
One wrong turn on them route finders and you were screwed, pretty much.
Because you couldn't find your way back and there was no map. It was just a set of directions, wasn't it? Yeah.
Totally. So to bring things to a close, you do a lot of teaching these days. I was just kind of wondering, do you see any kind of parallels with your students on how you learned back in the day, or is it just a whole new ball game now, how students taking information and how they learn? Or do you just see similarities in the excitement when they start to learn songs?
Do you know, I have a real kind of love-hate relationship with teaching music. And I think it's largely born from me suddenly feeling massively responsible for, you know, helping, especially with younger people, younger students, helping shape their musical life. And I think it is a massive responsibility, and it's something I take really seriously. So, you know, I don't want to go about it half-assed. You know, I want to introduce them to lots of really good music, but at the same time, you know, kind of work at a pace and in a style that suits them. I think the hardest thing to remember is that it takes a long time to become a musician, and it's not just about being really good on your instrument. So I try and remember that, and I try and instill that in my students, particularly the singing students. I try and really get them to think about, what are these lyrics saying? What does that mean to you? What have you got in your own experience that you can connect to this feeling? And getting them to think about the craft as well. It's like, okay, that's fine. You've just sung that song really nicely, but I didn't believe you. You know, I kind of try and push them a little bit like that. The ones who I've been working with a little while and are more capable, you know, and I really like people to sort of just discover that joy, but there's a depth to that joy as well. I think to be a true musician, like, music's not a superficial thing. It's something that you feel really deeply in every fibre of your body. It's really important. So if I can offer that to people that I teach, even if they don't take it or they don't get it or they're not ready for it or I do it in a wrong way, but even if I at least try to get them to access that feeling and that experience, then I feel like I've done a good job. Beyond making them a grade 8 pianist, you know, you can play all those notes really quickly, brilliant. Like, I'd rather they did something really simple.
Definitely.
But
I mean,
really
I think that's the secret at the end of the day to taking it to the next level. You could just play 3 notes and just put somebody to tears if they really mean it, whereas somebody could be taught a million notes or the craziest piece of music, but it could come through stale and no feeling in it. But if you could just get that combination of the passion and energy in there as well, then that's the secret.
Yeah, I think that's because of the punk rock, you know, as long as you can play 3 chords and you're away, you know, and that's what I always try and give my piano students very early on. I give them 4 chords. I give them C, A minor, F and G, and I teach that to them, and I just say, right, now you can play hundreds of songs. And I show them that. Do you know that Axis of Awesome video? That's all the 4 chord songs, and it's a massive medley. I play them that, and I never tire of seeing people's jaws hit the floor, and they're like, these are all the same chords. I'm like, yep. So there's your foundation. So all you got to worry about is building on top of that and doing something that means something to you, because everybody borrows the same foundation. It's the same chords. You're not going to come up with a new chord sequence that hasn't been done in the past 80 years of pop music. It's not going to happen, so stop worrying about it.
Right, and just enjoy yourself. Well, thanks ever so much, Carol. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us on the podcast, and good luck with the new album, and I shall speak to you soon.
Nice to speak to you, Bobby.
Then just stop worrying, baby. Yeah, just stop worrying, baby. Yeah, just stop worrying, baby. Go and do it all on your own.
Thanks to Carol for taking the time for such a fun and chilled out chat. Really enjoyed talking to her during this weird lockdown pandemic time we're in at the moment. I'm hoping once things get back to normal, then we'll be out on the road together again soon. In the meantime though, please head on over to Carol's website at carolhodge.co.uk and pick up your copy of Savage Purge. I think there might be a few snazzy copies of the album on coloured vinyl too, so dive in there quick. Cheers everyone for the continued support. Keep dropping those likes, shares and follows wherever you can to keep up the momentum you're really helping to build. The download numbers continue to grow on all the episodes, so if you're diving back into the older conversations, then that really is awesome. Also, if there's anything you'd like me to ask future guests which you think might evoke some cool stories, then please drop me a line and let me know. So till next time, I've been your host Rob Lane and want to say cheers for checking out the Straight to Video podcast. I'll catch you on the next one.